there's a tendency to think of XML as the standard, so I just create whatever set of tags I like. This data element, that data element, the other data element. Where working with something like HL7, we get pushed into a more formal paradigm, capturing things as observations and codifying things and having our data structures abstracted a bit rather than very, very concrete. And I think having very concrete data structures feels good up front, but it's going to cause trouble.
So then perhaps what we should do, well, if we decide to use XML version of HL7, should we not maybe do that throughout the API? Seeing as things like the libraries that you use, like the Happy API, can easily pass either the XML or the EUI version of HL7. Is that something we should look at doing at this stage and make all of our testing in XML?
You're talking V2 or V3?
V2.
I tend to agree with you a little bit here that I'm worried we're trying to plan too much for next year and not what we've got in front of us at the moment. And just looking at the time we have, how far down the road we'll here, and if it's going to have a very big overhead to change to a new version, is this the right place to do it, or do you put on a wish list? If I understand some of the concepts already, adding an additional format is something that can be done in ability.
That's true. It's not really adding a new version, it's still using the same version of HL7 and the same messages in the same format. It's just changing the representation.
I think you should parameterize that again.
I think the reason why we nudge towards the standard V2 messages is that a lot of the world's devices and applications are increasingly speaking that. Softwares and a number of other things that might ultimately interact with the interoperability there. So I think you gain by being able to speak that language, by default. But I do think that times change, standards will evolve, the syntax has evolved, and so to me, sticking with what you have, parameterizing, allowing someone to say I want a V2 XML file instead as a response, or in the case of a patient summary at CCD, I think is the most robust way to build it, and we should kind of have that by default and allow the response messages to be parameterized as much as possible. Build the ones that we want to start with, but have the ability within all of them to have multiple return options. I think that's helpful, and I think it will encourage the most rapid uptake when other systems come into the exchange. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I don't think you should. I think right now making the decision of should we do V2 versus V2 XML is wholly arbitrary at this point and not reflecting. I think you should be driven by the needs, right? And I think right now we've already got a good pathway, I would say, with it, not make deep fundamental changes, but pull it out and having your design very clearly that you can parameterize and specify a different result message. How do we get that back? And I think the option should be V2 XML and CDA for some of these transactions, like admission and stuff like that. It's a little bit bulky, and it's not even our colleagues for industry say that they would use V3 messages for those types of responses, including Dr. Shadow. He says she's V2 for those. So I think when it comes to sending a document back, and in this case, like a summary message document, I think using the CDA or in particular the CCD makes a lot of sense, but I would stop there, just based on the information that's already out.
Okay. So basically what we come to is saying just what we have for now, but perhaps just support both the EI and XML versions of it.
Yeah, I think again, if you pick the right add in APIs into your code base, being able to output standard pipe delimited versus XMLized HL7 should be just a parameter away. Because they're not fundamentally different. They're just wrapped in tags versus wrapped in pipes. So I think if you use the right library, you'll get both.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. So that's why I thought we could do both, but maybe we should. Yeah, okay, we could do both.
Yeah, I mean, how much extra work it really is.
Just on that point, the point of care systems, which version are you accepting?
Flexible multi is using the family union and consumer.
I think that's what I'm looking at between the two views. Pick one of them as what we're going to be using for the point of care systems. It's a parameter way if we're going to do it that way. We need to show this straight through. So pick a solution and then implement that. It's great to parameterize it, it's only useful if you actually use it. Find it's either the pipe limited or the XML, and I think driven by your use case on the care side. And Ryan, that'll show you which one you need to get in first.
It's really I mean, just so that everybody understands, using between the XML formats of HL7 and the pipe limited format, there's literally a switch on parser.
That's where I'm not arguing that. What I was getting stuck on talking about how we can understand too much when the reality is we need to consume it. So we just need to make a decision weighing what is the point of care system we want to take. It's not a parameter you're going to use and then find it.
It's not going to be a challenge. It's like two steps. Try to make it everything format.
Yeah, so I think we'll stick with what we're doing for now, but then try to support both as parameterized options. I think that's useful. Okay, so the next thing I want to discuss, I think everyone's fairly happy with the number of client registry transactions we have. Noting some of the short points earlier about perhaps grouping them together at a later stage. What I do want to talk about for now, which might be something that's only really come up, or only really thought about lately, and that's for the client registry in terms of the basic format we're using is XGQ an option that we should actually be using at this stage, seeing as OpenEMPI and some of the client registry options support XGQ as a standard. We do have the option to actually think about making the shift now before we get too far into it. So I don't think XPEQ to me is not something I'm very familiar with. So I don't know if there's someone who's very familiar with XPEQ that can give us some advice on this. Should we consider using XPEQ for some of the client registry things versus what we're using now? XPEQ is a part of HL7, so I just don't know very much about it, so someone knows something about it.
It's actually not part of HL7. It's an OMG standard, Object Management Group standard for getting, basically querying for patient information. The basic notion of it, the basic dialogue is the same as you see in the HL7 messaging. It's a more recent, more streamlined, in some views, like a more object-oriented and more general specification. I think it's a next year kind of thing. And again, going back to the discussion, with that, let's not repeat the discussion we had at the beginning, but I don't think we're in the position of having a full-bred dialogue between the registries and the client systems about patient identity, just for just basically just for connectivity reasons. And so I would say, given that we know we have an interoperability layer, the inherent in that is the fact that we can define different calls that refer to different ways of doing things. That's an alternate way of doing the whole get a bunch of clients, here's a bunch of clients, oh, I like this client, give me the summary data on that client way of doing things.
Yeah, and that PageSpeed is simply another way to do what we've described. You have a bag of traits about a particular individual. You want to find out where they receive care. You have a single unique trait. You want to find out who this individual is. Once you know who they are and where they receive care, you can return clinical data back. There's no magic in what PageSpeed does, and in fact, some of the folks that we talked to have conversed between web service calls and PageSpeed. So there's no new magic under the sun here. It's about, do you got the patient? Yes or no? If you got the patient, where's their data? And pull it together. It's just a formalized way of interacting so you're compliant with a particular set of standards. I think there's a pretty high bar unless we work with some of the MPI vendors that we're talking with support this mechanism, but they also support other mechanisms. So it's not the only mechanism to go with. A lot of folks, the primary value I've seen PageSpeed today is to be compliant, to be able to claim compliance with current standards. Not necessarily that there's true value added, other than it's a fairly well rationalized set of transactions that you can leverage. And if you trust in the process that's developed, then they're comfortable with it. To Mead's point, if we have mechanisms or calls in place that we wish to use, there's going to be some sort of translation of these calls, I imagine, in order to talk to the client registry. Right? Because the client registry doesn't know what your system call is today. So we're going to engineer either into the MPI or into some sort of intermediary layer to do that. Whether that's changing it to a PageSpeed call or something else, or a full-born, web-based web service call. That's to be determined. So I don't know that I would even want to over-specify what we've got today until we have a better sense of who the receivers of this call are going to be. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think so. So you're suggesting we stick with what we define already rather than move to PageSpeed, because it doesn't have a huge value add until we've actually defined what we're going to be beginning with, what coverage we're beginning with, and even then it can be transformed in the interoperability lab, and we still use the same API that we have already defined. Is that correct?
That last piece, the API may change. We build in and fully support these well-specified transactions. But to get data in and out of the client registry, to get data in and out of the client registry, you have to transform into that. So I don't want to. My only for separation is your last point, where we just transform and then we use all existing indexes. Then make this right. So
I thought of the system to what I'm doing the discussion going on here is to put this in the next version back for the next feature. It's not on a critical path for this year, this means it's a potential next year opportunity, but it's good to put it in that bag that if there is space and there is a need for it, we can get to it. What I'm doing between you and Sean, it is work that can be done in interoperability there, and whichever way the transfers happen, we can get it right. But I don't want you to spend too much time debating it's too much more, because it doesn't seem to be giving us much more benefit at this stage. Do you agree?
Let me just say that the reason that I mentioned PageSpeed is that OpenAPI comes through as one of their features with interoperability. So if we want to be able to talk fairly easily to them, we could support this format ourselves. That's I'm not sure. That's why I'm throwing up the group. We could try and expose you to people in the bottom, but then we know if we want to, what you're going to use for the NPR, whether it's a likely candidate at the moment. So that was my
query for the 5-1 delay, and I thought that would be top for sure.
the top one.
Let's just change our variant.
And at this stage, it doesn't make a huge difference because this is going to be the point of care, service facing API, and then we can do whatever needs to be done with that end. Yeah.
Have we done any disadvantage to ourselves by choosing this now? Is the switch difficult? I'm not sure. So we're choosing to go with what we have, which I'm assuming we don't need to substitute. Or no?
Yeah.
That's not.
Well, I think what we see here is what Ryan just described is two views to this opportunity ability. There's what we can facing view, mainly described here, and then there's the back, the service facing view. And what we haven't nailed down yet is what is that back service facing view to the client registry. It could be fixed PDQ and transform to H7B, H7 happens in the ability there. So until we know what the right registries we're going to use, I don't think it's going to be very useful for us to say we're only going to support this version to our right registry because that may limit us at this stage. But the beauty of the interoperability there is the speed which you can add new influence for both ends.
Okay, well, just kind of forward the decision, and I'm unclear as to, I thought when you decided to go with what we have, not use fixed PDQ right now, but then that could be next year's project.
Yeah, I think that not use fixed PDQ now is not exposed to the point of care systems.
Step back a second. One suggestion of what we're going to do now, which was one I made earlier, was we have basically have two transactions for the point of care system. Here's somebody, give me their information, and either get information or a name. We don't know about that person. And the other one is create a new encounter. So if that's true, then any dialogue between the systems, any kind of get client list of any sort is a next year issue. Is a next year issue. Now, is that, so that perspective that I walk in the door with, is that a proper view, or is that cutting back too much?
Actually, given how narrow is the use case that we're standing up in phase one, it probably could be two directions, only two. One is tell me everything there is to know about this particular client. And if you don't know anything about this particular client, it's going to throw an exception, and I've got a whole other workflow to sort of tell them nothing to the system. But are you assuming that we won't have interactions to do that? And the other is just put the encounter information up into the system. Now, above our interoperability, then we have all kinds of things that we have to be able to do. We don't have to expose them all below our interoperability. But above our interoperability, there we're talking about the technology server, we're talking about the client registries, provider registries, and so on. You're saying just two?
Well, yes, above the interoperability layer, the statement get, can you give me the clinical data for this patient assumes that there will be a query to the client registry, is that patient here, yes or no? So, as you say, that's above the interoperability layer. What it drops out is the query, okay, here's some demographic information, can you give me a list of clients who correspond to this demographic information? And that's certainly a loss of function. I mean, it certainly doesn't, it doesn't allow you to come into the clinic and say, okay, here's John Smith, age 23, phone number such and such. Do you have an NID for him? yes, I do have an NID, okay, using this NID get his clinical information. You lose that ability to have that back and forth. Now the question is, do you want that ability to have that back and forth?
And you lose that ability in the, from the end application or the interoperability there?
No, in the end application. Again, I'm assuming that there is no direct user interface to the client register where somebody will sit down with a screen that is a client register screen and say, okay, let's see if somebody's there. So, in my thinking, what drives my thinking is there's a very short time frame, there's a very specific use case. So the way I think about it is let's take that use case and strip out absolutely everything that's not totally necessary for that use case and see if we can do that.
I think I understand what you're asking, but I think we already have a lot of this in place. We already have a lot of these transactions specified. And having this extra functionality is beneficial, as you said yourself. So I don't think at this point we should change the transactions we are doing because we're already a long way down. And I think this provides a great level of functionality having these sets of transactions. So I don't think we should try to combine too many of these transactions together because then it makes the work, then it makes the API reflect our workflow instead of allowing the API to enable point-of-care systems to do their own workflow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think we previously, when we started the session, then go transaction, so let's it's fine.
But point taken, I think we need to keep it as simple as possible.
And really, to me, the big question is, what are the things that we're going to ask OpenMRS to do? Are we simply going to ask it to send, here's a new patient, tell me about him, or are we going to ask OpenMRS to have a dialogue with the client registry? I mean, that's really the bottom line question. Because I think that's what, because in terms of our implementation, 90% of the work is going to be getting the client system to do what it needs to do.
So, one thing rule book is that we.
At some point, we're going to be able to walk through the whole workflow today, correct?
You expressed the interest in doing it.
I think that will cover quite a bit.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much everything we wanted to discuss about client. There was one more thing, and that's when we were talking about provider registry yesterday, we added an endpoint where we just returned the enterprise provider ID as a single message instead of having to actually query for a client's record. This could be probably useful for the client registry as well. In terms of just verifying that through the interoperability of that, it would be much more efficient as we decided yesterday. So perhaps this is something we should add to client registry transactions as well. Okay. Yep. So I think we'll move on to the shared health record. So for the shared health record, I'm actually just going to highlight the overview of what the transactions we support. It's basically three major transactions. Saving a patient encounter, which should just be posting an HSM-RO1 message through to the shared health record. There's query for previous encounters, where you're able to get a patient's previous encounters based on a certain set of query parameters. Also, RO1. And to get a single encounter, we need to specify the encounter ID, and it'll return a single encounter in an HSM-RO1. So those are the messages. That's what we're planning to support. I think those are pretty, I don't think there's anything more we can add if anyone has opinions about that. Yeah, I think those are pretty stable. I know Paul wanted to talk us through, instead of using the RHEA using a CCP. Is it? So maybe you want to talk us through that a little bit? Yes, well, I don't know the structure of CCD, so maybe you could just outline some of that, and maybe what we should do.
I would say we should probably have our shared health record discussion first. Or not. I mean, here's my concern is, will we be storing information, salient clinical information directly associated with the patient, or will we be storing everything simply as a collection of encounters? And I think that's an open question.
I don't understand the form, but go ahead.
When we want to return the clinical information to the patient, is it all structured within the context of the encounter at which the data was gathered, or is there information that is considered, that's represented as directly associated with the patient? Say typically you might think about a problem list where there's a list of problems for the patient independently rendered outside of the context of the encounter. Now, I don't think we've ever had the discussion about whether the shared health record will do it that way, one way or the other. But I think knowing that's really important for hearing your comments. That's my caveat.
And so the shared health record discussion should happen to describe how data is persisted in the shared health record, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because I don't think we've really committed.
Like allergies and things that are not necessarily inherently cross-sectional, but span across a person over time.
Yeah, and we can capture those, we can represent those as they were captured, or we can say, no, they need to be represented independently. I bet you have opinions on that.
So we could maybe stop here and start the shared health record conversation. Carl, I don't know, we should think about doing that and pick this up later, or?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to go. One of the areas we haven't touched based on is the terminology service calls that are going to happen. Do you feel you want to put those in here, or would they maybe better contextualize our discussing shared health record and the interaction between that?
Perhaps that's best. We can have another session for this to finish it off after the discussion. It's probably important.
And so we move to SHR in the session, and so probably a good time to put a pin in this because we do have tea starting in 15 minutes. But if we want to start the discussion, break tea and come back for it, that would be great. Otherwise, another 15 minutes if you've got anything else fast to talk about.
So something that occurred to me yesterday, which sadly probably should have occurred to me a year ago. But right now, OpenMRS is registering patients, even in clinics that will be in, that are for acute care. I realized the same thing as you rapid SMS. We have no way, we're going to see a lot more traffic, I think, than we intended, because we are not going to have a good way to dump the messages that are not related to the pregnant women. So for example, in rapid SMS, they send just an ID number with whatever's, the risk of finding. We need to see if that ID number matches to one of our pregnant women or not. So we're going to have to still process that message. If it doesn't match, we need to do something with it. And then we're going to fail it. So have we thought about some layer that filters, or we filter by the machine that's used? I don't know, because most of the clinics are already going to be live registering patients. Are we going to check that against the client registry? Are we trying to find the pregnant women in those care visits? I think we should. And the only way we can do that is just take every single one.
But which messages, aren't we only dealing with the maternal care messages within our SMS? Which messages are related to
There's risk messages. And risk could be either a child or a mother or an adult. Not for everyone.
Well, if we get a risk, okay, if you get a risk message, the interoperability layer, we've said we'll only accept it if it relates to a patient that the interoperability layer already knows about.
What's communicated to the interoperability layer? The individual client or the rapid SMS server? Okay. So can't work be done on the rapid SMS side to deal with that?
Yeah, I'm just saying we haven't done that. That was not on the radar. And I don't know, where's the rapid SMS? I don't know how hard that's going to be to do.
Or the flip side is, how hard will it be for us to have more stuff than we need and only process against the stuff that we need?
I guess I'm kind of a problem-oriented person here, and I'm not sure what the problem we're raising is. Sure, there will be these transactions coming in, and I'm frankly taking, I take the Statue of Liberty, the United States model is giving you entirety week your core and data. And so if they send in an ID with some sort of risk data, you link that against the shared health record. This record gets orphaned now because I have no idea who it is except an ID. The data gets stored in the shared health record under some generic rapid SMS observation variable that may or may not get mapped more granularly later in the future. Later that patient comes into open MRS clinic and gets registered with that NID. That information goes into the shared health record. That demographic is updated. Oh, now we know who this patient is. Oh, they've got some rapid SMS data here as well. If we choose to display that information in open MRS, we can't, because we'll flag that there's rapid SMS data and decide how to do it. I don't see the issue here.
So that patient's a man.
I'm not sure that there's too much of a problem. In fact, rapid SMS, most of the risk factors are, and all children, for example, are recorded against the NID of the mother, and then they have the birth order. So you know whether it's a risk related to the child because you have the NID plus the number of the child.
That actually is a problem. If you're registering child symptoms against the mom's ID, that is a problem.
But it's the mom plus. So that's you can parse it out. If it doesn't have that additional modifier that says it's not the mother that's sick, but it's the child, then you can parse those out. So I'm not sure that. I think that could be handled either on the rapid SMS side, or you could filter those out if you get a full stream of data.
It's not a showstopper. It's just something.
Yeah.
It's not a showstopper. It's just something we hadn't thought of before,
Right.
and I'm more worried about the open MRS. Registrations. So how are we going to filter out those that are pregnant? How do we?
Because that's a report. You report a pregnancy as and then from then on, you connect back to that mother for that pregnancy. For the most part, they're not just reporting incidental diseases. It's really pregnancies and risks related to. You're saying not getting your health
Why would we want to filter them? Why not just accept them for that they're not pregnant patients, they're not pregnant. They're there. It's building up the nationwide health shared health record.
Because you have to do that data model
But-
for all of those.
You mean registering any key person within the clinic on the rapid SMS system?
No, not rapid SMS.
I mean, sorry, the open array system.
Sorry, Ryan. Can I ask you guys to put up the overview model and this, and you can walk us through what you think the challenges like you had on the early day when you guys did? Because there's a lot of convolution in thinking around things, and I'm hearing different problems from both sides. Right, but they're not each heard that for us. Then Liz can walk through the challenges that we're thinking through. I'm taking to error a bit with Sean on this side, but I wanted to see where I may be running short of ideas or what the challenge would be.
Yeah, so the issue is, it's not so much a problem, it's just something I hadn't thought of, maybe everybody else thought of it except for me. But when we register a patient, we talk about the flow, we register a patient in the antenatal care for their first visit, which is not done right now in open MRS. But they do register people for acute care visits, using the same kind of information. So we just need to make sure that the acute care visit is not, whether or not we have to decide, are we going to allow that acute care visit to go up through the interoperability there that checked or registered or not.
And the question is, why wouldn't we?
We would, well, I think we should. It's just that is something that had not occurred to me to the rest of it.
My question is, are we worrying about storing our data or just the registration?
Well, even if you just store the registration, that now means that OpenMRS that is implemented has to have, we have a set of different registrations. And so we would have to enforce that the NID is used in acute care, which is not done right now. Or we get a registration without an NID in it, and we dump it.
You put in the client registry, you do that.
We could put in the client registry, but they don't supply us with sufficient data.
You have a name, some sort of ID, and so on, correct?
Should there? We have name, should there? Name, what, it's NID, and their mutual number, right?
I think somebody can find that. I'm not going to say if they come over to board.
So I think the IDs we have our mutual number, and but NID is not mandatory. Most of them are not filled out right now in acute care clinics. In the registrations that I've done right now, with MRS in the clinics in Wrong Valley District, for example, for acute care only, we do not have. They mostly do not enter their NID. We had no reason to enforce that. So they only use it as an identifier. I think when I asked in the clinics I was in, very rare for people to show up with their NID as an identifier. They search by name, they get an OpenMRS number, they use their mutual for sure. But, so we wouldn't have a primary identifier for it, which is fine, we could just dump them in, but it just dawned on me yesterday that we'll have a lot more message traffic than we thought we would have before, because it's not just our pregnant women number or something. That's not useless. So,
I think what you're trying to help them understand is the environment that we're going within already has technology in place.
right.
And there are some implications about the existing workflows and how those juxtapose against the new workflows.
Right, even though acute care is out of scope for us here, we still wind up, they're still registering every patient. So we have to say, if the registration happens in this part of the clinic, or it's an acute care registration, or something else, OpenMRS has to say, don't send that message up to the interoperability layer. Or, we agree, every registration gets sent out, in which case that's going to be another piece of work to make sure that they have the proper ID, or else we won't really be able to register them. Then our client registry is going to require the NID and some other identifiers, which it is. Then we would need to have a training or something on the OpenMRS side for acute care.
How's this is being done?
So currently the agency registration is separate, and once the register we push those data out to the registry. And so the idea was that when other acute care or when other registration process happens, they will just use that API to use that functionality. And so we don't impose our workflow or what's currently there, or when they need to use it, they'll opt in.
I think the question that she's asking, though, is a simple one, is if they come for a visit outside of a maternal health visit, will we send a registration message to the exchange or not? And I think we said no to start with, but let's just be clear about that.
I thought we said no too, but I don't know how we're going to make sure we know which one it is.
It's an encounter type. I mean, do they come in and say, hey, we're coming in for an antenatal visit? Or
Yes. Yes. We have to default that on the registration screen right now. Everybody comes in for a mutual visit.
Is this helpful to you? Yeah. So what do you think?
So have we built a filter somewhere that says we're only taking this kind of visit?
It's a agency company.
Okay.
Encounter type.
So no other encounter will go any kind of encounter today.
Unless we decide otherwise.
Right.
The next session, what other health events we want to
Because, as you pointed out, sometimes pregnant women are seeing.
Coming in for acute care visits. And that's a piece of information that they have no way to connect right now, which would be advantageous advantageous, but that would be the other can, or how do you find out of all those acute care visits, who's pregnant, that we care about, and who's not, and do we then, I mean, I would worry the scope of this would expand too far. But anyway, that was.
Well, question number one, are we concerned, let's say we have a constrained set of messages going up to the interoperability, and we then open up the door and there's a flood of messages. Do we have an issue with just the bandwidth? Is that a problem? It's just handling number of transactions across the network. Is that a problem? I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
Can I suggest we break the tea and come back and start with the SHR, and that may give us a bit more context to talk about. Great. Tea served outside as usual, and we'll run by 11, come back at 11 o'clock.
An hour ago.